So once again, Melissa, thank you so much for joining us, and to everybody who is joining us tonight, thank you so much for being here. Bye.
Awesome. All right, can you hear me? Awesome, I got a thumbs up there. Thank you, Alice, so much. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick introduction. Thank you so much for joining, whatever time zone you are in. If you are in AM like myself, it is early at 8 o'clock. If you're in the evening, good evening, and afternoon, good afternoon. All right. So a little bit of background of who I am. I know a lot of you probably saw that on the initial invite, but so I got my start really in social media marketing from the textbook side. I've written textbooks on internet research. I authored the first college textbook on social media marketing back in 2012. And no, that did not mean that I was an expert to begin with, but what it did mean is that I read every trade book on the industry. And so that's really how I actually got my start into social media marketing. And as you know, it is a field that is ever evolving. So a lot of what I do is actually research and figuring out what all the industry leaders are saying are best practices, and then helping to share that. I also teach courses in social media marketing, a certificate in social media marketing, and have been for the past 9 years. And in addition to the academic side, I've also worked in the field, right? So I've worked for a number of different technology companies, nonprofits, and most recently, I've really been focusing on working with small businesses. So a lot of you I saw, thank you so much, by the way, for sharing why you wanted to attend this webinar, because that was really helpful. And a lot of the businesses I work with now are small businesses, and helping them how to actually use social media efficiently to drive demand. And then in terms of my own education, I got my bachelor's from Gonzaga University in public relations, and then an MBA from Willamette University. Awesome. All right. So now that you know a little bit about me, I thought we could go over some goals for today. So I always like to start here so you know where we're going, because social media is a big, wide open field. So what we're focusing on today is, first, I want to make sure that you walk away with a clear understanding of how to express your brand on social media. So there's actually going to be a handout that will be emailed to you after the presentation. So I'll let you know when that is, and you won't need to take a lot of notes on that section, but really starting to understand, how do you define your brand on social media, and what does that entail? The second is that I want you to be able to walk the walk, right? So my big thing is making sure that this presentation is really actionable for you. I want you to walk away with some very clear steps and things that you can start doing today. So we'll cover what I consider the 5 keys to successful social media marketing. And although the platforms and what's popular changes, I would say every couple of years, these are the things that I've seen over the past 9 years that have stayed consistent. These 5 keys, these strategic focuses, really continue to be best practice. And then finally, talking the talk, right? So one of the things that I think even scares marketers to this day is actually how to measure your results, and then how to talk about it, right? In terms of like, what do these metrics mean for your overall business? So we'll go through that as well at the end. All right, so the first thing I want to do is talk through what really makes a brand successful on social media. So there's really kind of 3 key things. The first is that they are consistent. So no matter what platform you're on, whether you are on Twitter, if you're on Facebook or Instagram, when you come to a specific brand page, you know it's them, not just from the fact that it's their logo or it's their handle, but the way they write, the types of images they use. And so that's the first thing that we're going to focus on today. It's helping you really define what are those brand elements and how do you display them on social media. The second is that they are authentic, right? So social media was designed for people to connect with people, and businesses just went and inserted themselves, right? So we have to play in a space that was designed to connect individuals to other individuals. And we'll talk about how you can do that as well. And then finally, they are unique, right? You know those brands, right? They're the ones that you like to follow. There's really something unique about the type of content that they create, what they write about, the images you see. Awesome. All right, so now let's get into how do you express your specific brand on social media? And the question I always like to begin with is, what do your followers need to feel in order to act. So what do I mean by this? So regardless of what you're doing on social media, your end goal is to make more people be your customer, right? So what is the feeling that they need to have in order to buy your product or service? So let's go with some examples here, right? So let's say you are a financial advisor. When I read your content on social media, I need to feel safe, right? That's really important. Same thing if you're providing legal advice, any of those types of products or services, if you will, that people really need to trust you in order to work with you. Now, let's say you're a coffee shop. Maybe people really need to feel entertained if they want to come to your specific coffee shop because there's so much competition. And then if you are a graphic designer or an artist, which I saw in some of the forms that you filled out, that some of you here are, right? You own graphic design businesses. But someone needs to come to your social media and feel inspired by the work that you create in order to choose you instead of all their other options. So starting with what is the emotion, what is that feeling that people need to have in order to buy your product or service? That's where I always recommend you start. And with that, so your content should evoke that specific emotion, right? Once you've identified what that feeling is that they need in order to work with you, you should try and have all of your content, everything you post, should help to create that feeling. So when I'm scrolling through your Facebook feed, when I'm scrolling through your Instagram feed, that feeling is throughout all of your content. And then the second recommendation I have here is don't be afraid to be more personal, especially if you are a small business owner or a small business. Ultimately, someone is going to choose to work with you because they like you, right? So they're choosing to work with you because you are a person that has earned their trust. And when you get to be a bigger business, I mean, you still want to be personable, but it's a little bit different. When you're a small business owner, you can show a little bit more of your personality through your social media. Because ultimately, people buy from people. All right, and the last thing to remember is it's still an extension of your overall brand. So if your brand is very serious, don't suddenly be very humorous on your social media, right? There's got to be some synergy there, and you've got to not have someone confused when they see, you know, an ad in a magazine and then go to your social media and they're like, this is not the same person. So making sure that there's some conformity there. And that's where you really need to talk with your whole team if you're working with a bigger organization before you make social media decisions. Okay. So now, this is another question I like to ask folks, especially as small business owners. If you're going to be running your own social media, how do you communicate best, right? Think about you uniquely. The goal here is not for you to have to learn all these new skills to use social media. It's to capitalize on your strengths as an individual and then translate it to social media. So if you're a really strong writer, a great platform for you might actually be Facebook because you can make longer form posts. Same thing with LinkedIn. There's opportunities to blog. If you're an excellent speaker, well, hopefully you can do some basic videography then too, because videos are a great way to showcase your expertise, especially if you're very comfortable in front of a camera. And then if you're a graphic designer, if you're a photographer, you really want to focus on that, right? You want to share as many images as possible, regardless of which social media platforms you ultimately use. So this is something, take away, think about this before you choose what type of content to create. All right, so now we're gonna get on to the branding elements checklist. And this is something you will get as a handout. So everything I'm about to cover on this slide, I know some of you may be taking notes, but don't worry about taking too detailed of notes here. So when you're thinking about branding elements, the very first thing is your profile image, right? So this is also sometimes referred to as your avatar, you know, the main image on your Facebook account, on your Instagram account, Pinterest, LinkedIn, whatever it is. But you want to make sure that you have consistency. Even if you choose not to use your logo, make sure it's the same image across all of them. So let's say you are a coffee shop, right? Maybe instead of using your logo, you choose to use a really nice photo of your coffee shop. Make sure you use that same image across every single platform, because that way, when someone new comes to your social media, say they go to your Facebook account first and then they look you up on Twitter, you want to make sure that it's very easy for them to know that they have found the right person. And then along with that, a really underutilized piece of real estate, if you will, is the cover photo, right? So almost every social media profile has a cover photo. And this is an opportunity for you to rotate out different messaging, whether that's like a specific campaign or a very specific call to action, right? So join us today, save now and buy XYZ, right? So make sure you're utilizing that real estate, but that you're using the identical cover photo for every one of your social media platforms. All right, and next is your profile bio, right? So a lot of people often just put here whatever their business description is or their tagline. What I would actually encourage you to do, especially on Instagram, is to write something about why they should follow you. And when I say why they should follow you, tell them what type of content they can expect, right? So maybe if you're, let's say, a personal trainer, you're going to be giving a lot of exercise tips, safety tips, whatever it is, say, you know, follow us for XYZ. This is really important because when you're trying to nurture brand new, you know, prospects to ultimately become your customer, you want them to already get some value from your social media accounts before they even know who you are. So just make a quick mention in there, you know, if you're like a cakery, like baking tips, right? So think of just a very quick little phrase that you could put in there in addition to the description of your business. All right, and third one, this is perhaps the most important, is your voice, right, for your posts. What is your writing style? And if you're not an author or English major, you might struggle to kind of come up with, all right, what does that mean? So here are a couple of ideas, right? So this may seem silly, but in this day and age, emojis are important. They actually increase the number of engagements you get per post. So when you're considering what emojis are you going to use, if any, identify what a couple of those are, right? So what makes sense for your brand? For example, if one of your brand colors is purple, instead of putting a red heart, you could always use the purple heart. These are very small things seemingly, but this can make a big difference when it comes to reading the content at that first glance, knowing that it's your brand. The second is capitalization. Are you using lots of capitalization? Some? Is everything in caps? You know, whatever that is, really write that out so that you have that as part of your brand guide. And then in terms of punctuation, do you show a lot of expression here? Do you use lots of exclamation points? And sentence length, right? Short, long, how to write. And the reason this is important to document to this granular detail is someday, right? The goal is ultimately to become a big enough business where maybe you can hand off some of this work. And the worst case scenario would be for you to finally grow your business to a point where you could hand off your social media and then it looks completely different, right? This is also important for you, even if you never intend to hand it off, because you need to be able to kind of come back and know exactly what the style is so that you can keep that consistency. All right. So number 4, what types of media do you share? And again, that kind of comes back to what we talked about a moment ago. What do you create best? How do you convey information best? But ultimately, identify if you're going to use photos, are you using original photos? Are you using stock photos? When you're thinking about graphics, if you're a graphic designer, you better be making your own graphics, right? This is your opportunity to show off your skill. But maybe if you're not a graphic designer, this is where, again, you use that stock photography. And same thing with the videos. Write down, what are the videos of? Are they of you speaking? Are they of, tours within your facility? Getting down to that level of granularity will not only help you create more consistent content, but again, with that handoff process. And then gifts. So we'll get into a couple of examples here in just a moment for the types of media. But then the last thing to consider is your responsiveness. Decide early if you are going to respond to every single comment, right? As your brand grows, this may not be a sustainable practice long-term, but early on, this is great for engagement. So at the very least, for example, like every comment, right? And consider how responsive of a brand do you want to be? Whew. Okay, that was a lot, but don't worry, all of this part will be in your branding handout. So let's get into some examples here, right? So when you decide if you will use a lot of photos on social media, you need to think about if it's appropriate or helpful to show the inner workings of your company or your own personal style. For small businesses, I highly recommend sharing more photos, because this is how you'll build your connection with your prospective customers. They are buying from you, not a faceless giant brand, right? So a great example here is from Staples. Although this is a big brand, I think this is hilarious. You know, right? You might be at work, but it's still Movember. So this is very cute, got a ton of engagement for them. Is an easy thing to do, especially if you're in a small office environment. Try and capture those funny moments, right? And then alternately, if you want to stay a little bit more faceless or nameless, you can also do this other example, right? So you can get some stock photography, but I think this is, again, very funny from Staples. They say, "Happy Halloween, beware of Dracula." And it's still like an ode to their product, but it's a cute way to use photography. And then if you are a graphic designer, consider making some really cool infographics, right? So this drink company, I'm not even sure what the relevance was here, but they're quite funny. And so they talk about daylight savings, and here are some different ways to set your clocks back. And I don't know how well you can read some of this, but I thought the funny one was the car clock. It says, "Not worth it, wait 6 months," right? So they've got some different ways of showing humor, very easy little images that you can include. Okay, so now looking to video. Now this is where you have to decide, are you a better speaker than writer? If you're comfortable on camera, I really encourage you to take some videos. Video is one of those trends that is not going anywhere in the near term. Video announcements and short videos get far more views than written posts currently. Part of this is because there's an autoplay feature. So when people are scrolling through their feeds, your video is going to autoplay sometimes. So perhaps you record short videos for, social media announcements, whatever that is. Here are some good examples. So Airbnb does an excellent job with this. And of course, if you're a travel brand, you absolutely need video, right? And here's they have like a Periscope video where they show you and you can navigate around this particular location. But on a more personal example, and like I said, if you're comfortable on video, so I used to do some consulting with and work for Act-On Software, and their newest senior vice president of marketing does these awesome weekly videos, right? So very simple, very easy, but she's recorded either interviewing other people or just sharing some of her own knowledge as a thought leader. And you can look here, this got almost 6,000 views, and she has, I don't know, not that many connections though. It's like a third. So the opportunity for shares, for engagement with video is very high. And if you're at all comfortable with video, I encourage you to try that. Okay, so GIF, right? What does this stand for? Graphic Interchange Format. That is an acronym you will never need to know again, but just so you know, it's essentially these quick, small-scale animations and film clips. So this can work really well for some businesses, and maybe this is how you're most expressive. Some brands thrive on humor and using GIFs. Some notable brands that do this really well actually made their own. So Huffington Post did this awesome GIF, right, where she shows like 9 different ways to fold scarves. This is very informative, very awesome, easy way to convey information. But again, they probably have a fairly good team to be able to create these. Starbucks also does, different cute versions of these animations to go with the different holidays. So these are all just different options for you to consider. But again, don't feel like you have to do all of it. Pick what you're comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable with certain things, always consider doing a little bit of outsourcing, right? You can always hire someone very small scale to create some of this content for you. Okay. Wow, we've covered a lot already. So far we've covered the whole expressing your brand, how to go about that. But now we're going to actually dig into what makes social media successful, some of those different keys. So the very first thing I want to talk about before we even get into what makes social media successful is I want to define kind of 2 key terms here. So we have organic social media and we have paid social media. So organic social media is the use of the free features of social networks to share text, images, videos to naturally grow your brand over time. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be focusing a lot on the organic side. What can you do for free? But paid social media, if you want to think of it this way, it artificially boosts the reach of your messages through paying for sponsored messages or display advertisements to target specific groups of people. Now, they both have a time and a place. So let's see where they kind of each have their strengths and then where they overlap. So with organic social media, you want to think about this as your long-term strategy. Ultimately, you're not always going to have budget to be able to pay for ads. And organic is really long-term how you actually build your following, how you connect with prospects, and ultimately get them to a point of purchase with your product or service. Another benefit of organic is it actually decreases the cost of your paid advertising. The bigger your organic reach is, the more followers you already have, the cheaper the cost of your paid advertising. Also, it helps at literally every stage of your buyer's journey, right? So when you're thinking about your buyer's journey, going from first discovering who you are, to having to build trust with them, to ultimately becoming a customer, and then ideally becoming a loyal customer. It also increases your credibility. So for example, if you have, let's say, 50 followers and you post barely anything, and then you run a bunch of ads, ultimately, when people go back to your accounts to look at your page, if it isn't robust, if there isn't a lot of activity, no one's going to trust the ad that you are running. Now, paid can be really great. So you can think of this as your short-term boost, right? This is awesome if you have like a particular campaign or a sales initiative that you need to get right away, right? If you're trying to fill a particular event, it might be worth putting a few ad dollars behind a couple of paid ads. It's, again, great for time-sensitive promotions, like I mentioned, the event registration. And then where they really overlap, though, is brand awareness. Both are going to ultimately help in different ways. Paid is going to get you in front of net new audiences, while organic is slowly going to get you in front of those net new audiences. Okay, so now we've got those key terms out of the way. Let's dive into some of what really makes people successful on social media. The first is to categorize your followers. So what do I mean by that? Categorize your followers, and this is an educated guess, right? This is not going to be a perfect science, but try and identify what stage your followers are in. So for simplification purposes, let's say there's the don't know us, right? So brand new people. You have your potential customers. So those are people who are aware of your brand, but not necessarily customers yet. And then you have your current customers. Now, the reason I say to categorize your followers is this is going to help you figure out what type of content to create for each platform. So the biggest mistake that I often see with social media is that people post identical content to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube, thinking that all of the audiences are the same. Now, initially, this isn't necessarily a bad strategy, but as you grow as a business, you really want to start to understand, okay, how are new people generally finding me? So when you're looking at this categorization, this is a sample categorization, if you will. YouTube, right? So YouTube, a lot of people will follow, find videos just based on, watching different videos, different ones get recommended. So it's more likely that someone that does not know about your brand will accidentally discover your content. So what does that mean then? So if I know that on Twitter and YouTube, people are more liberal with who they follow, and they may follow me even if they don't know who I am as a brand or business, this means I want to create what we call awareness content. You want to share content that explains what you offer, who you are, right? Now, you wouldn't want to do that necessarily for Facebook. Oftentimes, Facebook, your followers are people that are existing customers. They already know who you are, and it's going to be a real turnoff to them if you are consistently sharing content that they already know about. So let's say, again, for the sake of example, Twitter and LinkedIn, you've got some overlap, right? So I think that there's a lot of people that follow us that don't know us, and there's potential customers there. In that case, you also want to ensure that you are sharing testimonials, case studies, examples that can help build trust in a potential customer. And then let's say Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, right? Let's say all of those potentially have some of your current customers following you. These are platforms where you would want to share content that are like customer-specific deals, show a little bit more personality inside your business, photos of employees, right? So thinking of it in these terms is really helpful because it helps you decide how to create at least a little bit of variation in terms of the content that you're sharing. And ideally, you are progressing people through the different stages to become a customer. Now, the best way to do this is actually just to look at your own content, right? So if you're looking at the content you've shared so far, look at what gets the most engagement. Look at the posts that are getting the most likes. So for Facebook is a great example. You can easily scroll back through your content, say for like a month or so, and look at the different posts and see where you're getting a lot of engagement. The post where you're getting the most engagement will be a good indicator of what stage your followers are in. If they're only liking things that are customer related, great. You know you need to share more customer content. If they're engaging with a lot of things that are just you kind of sharing overall about your products and services, hey, maybe they are earlier in the funnel, right? Maybe they are just potential customers. But starting to take some educated guesses and then creating content based on what stage they're in will be really helpful. Now, if you're like, I have no idea, right? And you're looking at this, you're like, this is overwhelming. Take a little screenshot of this and the presentation will be sent out afterwards. But this is a really good common placement. So a lot of times with small businesses, this is actually very typical of what I see. A lot of the YouTube followers are non-existent. They're not customers. They don't know who you are yet. Twitter, you got a good mix. LinkedIn is both potential and current customers. And then Facebook and Instagram, a lot of times are current customers. So just something to start thinking about, right? This doesn't have to be a perfect science. It's much more art than science. But being able to start thinking about it in these strategic terms will help you figure out what types of things to share. Okay. So I can see here in the chat box, I think we're getting a lot of questions, and I promise I will answer all of them at the end. Awesome. Okay, so number 2, this one's a little bit more straightforward, right? So this second key to success, write in first person. There is something so much more engaging about saying, we are so excited to announce versus XYZ company announces, right? Just even reading that, you feel so much more engaged. There's a sense of enthusiasm. There's a feeling of connection, because like I said before, we are just playing in a space that was designed to connect people to people. So the more we can sound like a person, the better. All right. Number 3, your content mix. So in addition to kind of thinking about that categorization of your followers, when it comes to your content mix, you should aim for a minimum of 50% promotional and 50% trust building. Ultimately, the goal as you grow as a brand is to get it to be closer to like 70% trust building and 30% promotional, but early on, that's just not realistic. So what actually defines content that is promotional versus trust building? Let's get into that. All right, so when you're thinking of promotional, anything talking about your product or service is promotional. Anything that is lead generation focused. So lead generation meaning you're sending them to a particular page, right? So maybe you're trying to get them to download a white paper and they click on a link from your Facebook page. It goes to a page and you ask them for their email address and their name before they can see your content. So anything that's gated, right? If you're even thinking about, signing up for webinars, right? A lot of times you have to give them your email and your name. They're probably adding that to their database. So that's actually considered a lead generation activity. Anytime you talk about your events, right? So if you're holding in-person or digital events, again, that's considered promotional. And then campaigns. So if you are making, a lot of different posts about a particular sale that's coming up, that's considered a campaign and promotional. So more or less, in summary, basically anything about your product or service or where you're asking them for information is considered promotional content. Trust building. A great example of trust building content is curated content. So what do I mean by curated? Curated meaning anytime you're sharing content not created by you or your company. So a really good example of something that you could share, let's say you are a coffee shop. And as a coffee shop, you want people to drink more coffee. And there's an article that comes out that says all the health benefits of drinking coffee. If I share that article on my Facebook page, that is considered curated content, right? So you are using other third-party sources to emphasize a point that you would like to make, but that actually builds trust in your end consumer, right? They're not just hearing it from you, they're hearing it from an independent third party. Maybe it is great for me to drink coffee, so I know that I want to go to your coffee shop. And then thought leadership. So this is another great example of trust building. And let's say you are the CEO of this coffee shop and you are featured in the news article about, one of the top entrepreneurs, and you share that to your page. That again is that third-party source kind of helping to build trust. And in addition to that, anytime you write an article, right, you're writing a piece, a thought leadership piece, and sharing that to your page, that's also trust building because they're getting to know you and they're getting to know your expertise. And company culture, right? Like the Staples example, pictures of people actually within the business. Anytime you're showing off, you know, what's actually going on inside of your business, you're having that human connection. That's considered trust building. And finally, in the news, if your business is written about in any kind of news article, organization wins an award, share it because that is huge for trust building. All right, awesome. Okay, so number 4, create themes. So creating themes is fairly easy, right? So more or less what I'm asking you to do is to pick 1 or as many as 3 days of a week, right, to share a specific type of piece of advice. So let's say every Tuesday, you're going to share a tip, right? I actually started doing this on my own business account for social media. So every Tuesday I have something called the Tuesday tip, right? And it's just a piece of advice about social media marketing that I am sharing free. So the more you can do this, the more you can give away your knowledge, because oftentimes you start your own business because you are an expert in a particular area or because you have a deep knowledge or a deep passion. So being able to highlight that and educate your audience just even once a week is huge. This goes a long way for trust building. This also helps you with consistency, right? So you know every Tuesday at 10 a.m. you are going to share an awesome piece of advice. The other reason this is important is because it builds a habit for your followers and it will actually improve your response rate. So let's say you are sharing something that's really of value. If I see that as an audience member, right, and it says Tuesday tip, every Tuesday, I know I want to come back to your social media page, even if I'm not seeing it in my news feed. So you're really trying to build a habit in the end user. Okay, and finally, this will make your life easier. So repeat top posts. So what do I mean by top posts? So what you want to do is to actually review your top performing posts. So top performing more or less means whatever got the most response, right? So this gets the most engagement, the most likes, the most clicks. So it's very easy. A lot of the different social media platforms already have like an insights tab where you can go look and see what are your top performing posts. Or if you want to do it the old-fashioned way, just scroll back through your feed and you'll know which one gets the most engagement. So once you've identified what actually receives the most engagement, repeat that piece of content with a new description. So you can do this basically, I would say even a couple times a month, right? So a great example for a client of mine called Revival, so they're a personal training studio. They did this awesome introduction of one of their trainers. This reached like 1,600 people, got 312 engagements, which is extraordinarily high for them because I think they have about 200 followers. So when I saw that, I said, this is a great piece of content that you can share again. So maybe the next introduction, you share a different piece of information about this personal trainer. But the idea here is, and the reason this works, is not every one of your followers sees every one of your posts. It's just not possible. That's not the way that Facebook, Instagram, or any of the feed algorithms work. So the beauty of repeating top performing posts is 1, you already know that this type of content resonates with your audience. And 2, it saves you some time and effort, right? So when you can repeat the same content, and repetition with messaging is so important. I mean, that's also kind of marketing 101, right? People need to hear things 3, 6, 9 times before it sticks. Don't be afraid to do the same thing with your social media content. All right. We've covered a lot here already, but we're getting close to the end, so thank you for bearing with me. Now we're going to talk about numbers, right? So how to measure success. So I like to back up a little bit here. Before we even get to what social media metrics you should be looking at, let's talk about business objectives. Because if you're measuring social media for the sake of social media, you are wasting your time. The key is going to be tying back your social media metrics to your overall business objectives. A lot of you here, I know, are business owners or are going to be business owners. And the key here is that all of your work on social media ultimately helps your end business goals. So when we talk about business objectives, I think of kind of the 4 stages of the buyer's journey, right? So to simplify things, the first thing we're thinking about is brand awareness, which can be simplified and say your reach metric, right? How many net new people are you reaching? And then the next stage in that buyer's journey is nurture, right? So nurturing prospective clients, customers to ultimately become customers. So you want a metric that ties to this in social media as well. And then you want to think about your new leads and more sales, because ultimately, what does everyone want? More sales, right? So we kind of just simplify this and call it your convert or conversion. And then finally, you want to retain existing customers, right? So customer retention, loyalty, and how does all of this translate to social media? So the great news is that every one of these business objectives can be tied back to a specific social media metric. So let's dive into those. All right. So the first thing we need to do is we need to measure what matters, right? So when it comes to awareness, a couple of the items you want to think about are, well, let's go through. So you've got awareness, nurture, convert, and loyalty. When it comes to awareness, the easiest metric that you can tie to this is your number of followers, right? So when you're growing your followers, you're ultimately growing your awareness. Your overall brand awareness is increasing as your followers increase. And then you have your impressions, right? So this is another kind of pseudo metric, if you will, that can also kind of help you understand what is your overall brand awareness. Impressions are the number of people who saw your content. And this may outreach the number of followers that you currently have. Great example, like I showed just a moment ago from Revive Well, that training photo got so much play outside of the initial followers. So followers and impressions are the two key metrics here. And then total engagement. So this kind of actually speaks to two different stages, right? So when you're thinking of engagement, that is a good indication of how well you're nurturing people, but it's also a good indication of how well you are retaining your customers. Because like I said, some of your followers will be customers and some of them will also be prospects. So it's hard to really distinguish between the two, but engagement is a great metric for both. And so engagement includes your likes, your comments, shares, retweets. And then finally, you've got your number of clicks or leads. It depends on how sophisticated a system you have to track, but pretty much all the social media platforms will show you how many clicks you got on a particular post, right? So that's a really good indication of how well you are helping to convert people. All right, so the big thing I want you to take away here is that there are no failures, only opportunities. I know a big reason that people get scared to start measuring is because they think their numbers are going to go down, right? So think of this not as a failure if you see your numbers go down for a month, but simply an opportunity to do better the next month. And it ebbs and flows. No matter how perfect you do, the reality is your followers are humans and they're people. So when you're dealing with people, there's going to be some variability, right? No matter if you're creating the best content ever month over month, there are going to be months where there's less engagement. And that could be due to holidays, that could be due to any variety of factors. So this is really just helpful for you to make sure you're generally staying in the right direction. All right, so now when it comes to recording metrics, here is a simple way to record metrics on a monthly basis. So you could easily create this for yourself in like Excel or Google Sheets, right? A very simple table. You could even handwrite this if you prefer. So what you'll have in the first column is a list of all the social media platforms you're using. Let's say that's LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And then in the next column, right? So the second column will be your awareness or your reach metrics, and this includes your followers and impressions. The third column should be your nurture and customer retention metric, right? So this all really kind of comes back to engagement. So what are the total for your likes, comments, and shares? And then the last column can be clicks, right? So these are some great numbers, by the way, hypothetical numbers, but this is an idea of how you can look at it visually, and this format makes it really easy and digestible to understand how your social media metrics tie to your bigger business objectives, right? And also for you at a glance to look month over month, this is how things are trending. Is it ultimately, are all the totals going up? Are they going down? Are they stagnating? So I recommend recording this monthly and even weekly if you're feeling ambitious. Okay, so now we've kind of talked about all these different metrics. How do you actually start to think about it and conceptualize it and talk about it in a way that makes sense? So I want to give you an example. So again, kind of coming back to the metrics of following and impressions. If you're seeing that they're going up, the way that you might explain this to a colleague, to a superior, to your friend is, we saw a huge increase in brand awareness this month. Our social media following increased by 15%, and our impressions are up by 12% from last month. This is a way you can start to conceptualize that information. So another example, right? So our social media content is really resonating with our target audience. Engagement increased by 20% from last month. And let's say you want to talk about that lead or that click metric. How does that really tie in? So here's a great example. Our social media post that sent people to the product request form received 500 clicks this month, which explains the huge spike in leads this month, right? So again, this is when you start looking at your social media metrics and then your business metrics side by side. It actually makes sense why you're putting all this effort into social media. And let's say you did some extra analysis, right? You looked at your top performing posts. And you might say something like, we reviewed the top social posts and discovered that our followers are most interested in blogs about our customers. Next month, we will prioritize writing more about our customers to increase engagement. This is how you make those insights that you're gleaning actionable, right? So as you're looking through and seeing what is getting the most engagement, try and identify, is it the type of content, right? And again, this is all an educated guess, and you'll really hone your own skills and abilities to make these types of informed decisions as you do it more. Okay, so ultimately, big key takeaway here is that your social media should always educate and inspire your audience. Always be thinking of how you can do one or both of these things when you're trying to create great content, right? If you can educate them, awesome. You're going to build trust with whomever is following you. If you can inspire them, even better. So we've covered a lot, but I'm going to give you 3 key takeaways. If you walk away with this, awesome. Perfect. Okay, so the very first one here is make sure that your social media evokes a very specific emotion. Ideally, that emotion or that feeling that someone needs to walk away with in order to purchase your product or service. Second is create a social media brand guide for consistency. And that is what you will get in your email after this presentation. You will have a guide that you can fill out all of those examples. And then finally, measure your effectiveness. Ideally, if you're comfortable, every week, right? Set aside 30 minutes at the end of the week to look at your followers, your impressions, your engagement, and the number of clicks you got. Okay. And with that, we'll go to Q&A. So let me pull up the chat feature. And Alice, I don't know if you wanted to take back control for a moment.
Melissa, thank you so much. I think this was great and so helpful. We had a couple of questions while you were talking. The first was Noor. Noor, do you want to ask your question? Noor, I'm going to unmute you if you're still on here. Here you are unmuted, I think.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you for the nice presentation. My question was about GIF. I was wondering how to create GIF. Is there anything that we can use for that?
Yeah, so I'll have to send you some links, but there are definitely some different applications and some free applications online that I can send you some notes after the presentation. I can't recall the name right now, but there are free GIF creators. All you need is I think it's 5 to 6 different images, and then it will create the actual GIF for you. Great question.
Cool, amazing, thank you.
The second 2 questions were Zaid. Zaid, are you still here? And do you want to unmute yourself and ask them?
Hi. Hi, do you hear me? Hi.
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you for the presentation. I just want to know if for the Facebook, Go Live is recommended to make a live video on the home page or on the Facebook page or on the group. And what is the recommended to make for a business to go with Facebook page or Facebook group, or both is needed? Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, great question. So definitely begin with a Facebook page. A group requires a lot more activity and engagement and just work on your end of things. I think a group is ideal if you have like a customer base that wants to interact with each other. But I think just starting with the Facebook page, and then with your question regarding Facebook Live. So Live is basically your live streaming video. And I think that this is a really great feature if you are constantly attending events, or if you want to basically give like a little mini presentation digitally, the live feature can be really excellent.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. The next question we had was Ahmed. Ahmed, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question you had?
Sure. How's everyone? Thank you,
Great.
Melissa, for the presentation. My question
Yeah,
was, in the beginning of a creation of a business, how much personal content should be out there when focusing on both the personal content and the brand content, when it's new, when it's just starting?
Yeah, I would say, so there's quite a bit of personal content depending on what you're comfortable with sharing, right? So a little bit depends on your business. Are you, so I have a follow-up question. Are you thinking in terms, like what type of business is it? That would help me a little bit. Like, are you a trainer
right now,
or a coach or?
I'm working on Art of 360. I shoot 360 photos for attractions, public places, and businesses.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Yes, definitely include some like personal examples and anecdotes, because they'll really want to decide whether or not to work with you based on kind of your personality, since you're basically their consultant, right? So feel free to share a little bit more personal content. Obviously, keep it, relatively professional, but I think being able to show, why you love doing what you do, because people really love to work with passionate people. So you can tell a little bit more of your story of how you got to this point of wanting to do this type of work, and then show different samples of your work.
Awesome. Ahmed, was that helpful? Great. Next, I think Mohammed, you had a couple of questions about colors.
Hi. Yeah, I had a question on which colors do perform better in social media in terms of building trust and authority.
Ooh, good question. So I think in terms, you said colors, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it depends a little bit on your own branding colors. I encourage you to use whatever is closest to your logo or your color scheme. But if you're trying to think about just if you have a blank slate and you're willing to kind of use a lot of different colors, brighter is always better. So whatever colors you're thinking, think the brightest version. So rather than a dark blue, you would want to go a brighter blue, a bright yellow. So those bright colors, and then also having a lot of white space. So when you're thinking about creating images, capturing images, the more white background and white space you can have, the more professional the content looks. So generally engagement's a lot higher. So whenever you can have a white backdrop or a lot of white space, that works well.
Thank you. I have another question actually. We are doing customer research for our businesses. We have surveys and we want to get as many people respond to them as possible. What are your suggestions for us to get using social media?
Yeah, so I think offer to do some sort of small scale giveaway if you can. Like say that one person who fills out the survey will get a small prize that doesn't cost a lot of money to your business, or maybe you could even give away like a free service, whatever kind of service you provide, something small, but just make it a little bit more of a contest and a giveaway format. That tends to do really well and encourages participation. The other thing that you can do when you're thinking about giveaway is asking people to tag like 2 or 3 friends in the post to get extra entries to potentially win whatever the small prize is, right? So you're asking them to increase, to comment with their friends' names to potentially win this small prize and fill out the survey.
Very clear. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, most welcome.
Those were awesome answers, things that we definitely haven't thought about, and I think we'll tell all of our entrepreneurs from now on. Aland, I think you were next. You had some questions. Aland, are you still here? Aland may have gotten off, I think, so maybe we'll move on. Noor, I think you were the next question again.
Another questions that I have is there are websites that automatically increase your followers, although it might not be like real followers, but it increases your page, so it might increase more credibility when people see that you have a lot of followers. What do you think about that?
So I would highly recommend staying away from any company that offers that, because I've seen a lot of people get scammed, actually, unfortunately. Although I do agree more followers help, ultimately, it's only if those followers are, I want to say, you know, real potential, right? So maybe they aren't a scam. They could be, you know, very real. But what I would encourage you to do instead is to use your account and actually go follow 500 people. I know that this is kind of time intensive, but when you're initially first building your follower base, the best thing you can do is actually follow other people, and then ideally they'll follow you back. So I would recommend doing it more organically, and also then in that case, you can be a little bit more selective, right? So maybe use a search term for everyone in your particular location, and then you can follow, you know, all the accounts that list that location and really actually start to build your business following. The other option is also to run a small scale contest or giveaway. And I know I keep referencing this. I actually have a whole YouTube video series that's free on YouTube. And one of them actually details every step to run a contest. So I'll send that link out as well. But one of the best ways to increase your followers early that's more organic is to run a small contest. So you can basically give away, you know, again, something small and say for everyone that's following us and likes and tags one person, you know, you'll be entered to win. And that way you're actually getting people to follow you who could be potential customers. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I'll send out that link as well. But I would encourage you, if there's an account that offers to give followers, just be very, very careful if they're asking for money. Because I've seen that go awry a number of times.
Yeah, they ask for money actually. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I would encourage you to try just following a bunch of accounts with your account first. Is this for Instagram or Facebook, if you don't mind my asking?
It's for both. It's whatever you like.
For both.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would start with Instagram. It's a little easier to build a following quickly. So definitely go there. And then the other thing you can do too is on Facebook, there's a lot of groups for, you know, either entrepreneurial women or whatever you're related, you know, whatever your business is. So look around at the Facebook groups and go join a couple, and then post in there and ask people in there to follow your business and offer to reciprocate. So this is something that you can do. And a lot of times people are very supportive, especially like I do this a lot because I'm a female business owner. And so I join groups that are like for women business owners. And I'm like, hey, follow my page. I'm trying to build it and I will return the favor. And people are very willing to do that. So that way you can build some real connections too.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
Awesome. I think Zaid had a question next. Zaid, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, hi again. I just want some tips for business lunch day. If you don't mind, please.
Sorry, say that again.
Some tips for business lunch day.
Business launch day. Yes. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I think business launch day, that's an exciting time. And one great thing that you can do is to reach out to friends and family. I think that those are the people that are always willing to support you, especially in the business launch time. And I would encourage you actually to start your page prior to your business launch. So maybe even like a week or two before, create your page, assuming you have, your logo and your business name solidified. Start the page and then ask friends and family to go follow and engage. And that's a really great way to kind of start to build a little bit momentum so that on business launch day, you aren't launching to 0 followers, right? So this is where you'll have some kind of initial engagement. And especially with business launch day, you want to have a lot of your content created in advance and just, share it, how excited you are, right? So these are the types of content that you can share. Say, hey, I would recommend having a post on every one of your social media platforms that you choose to use that says, hey, this is who we are, this is what we provide, and this is the type of content that you can expect from us. So a really good example of that would be, let's say you are a graphic design company. What I would encourage you to share is like, here's our services. You'll be seeing awesome graphics as we start creating more content for our customers. Please feel free to reach out with any business inquiries.
Okay. Is there any perfect time to launch the day? Like start posting on Facebook like at evening where all the followers and Facebookers who are watching Facebook or using Facebook and at evening or at night?
Yeah, so I would say, start trying it at night. But the great thing is, so Facebook Insights, which is a tab on Facebook, once you create your page, you'll be able to see it. As you grow your followers, once you get past, I believe it's 100 followers, you can click on the Insights tab and it will actually tell you what time of day your followers are majority online. So you can start scheduling your content for the times that you know that your followers are already online. And there is a scheduling feature on Facebook. So instead of post, you can choose like a little drop down and it will say schedule, and then you can choose the exact date and time. So you don't always have to be posting at that exact time.
Okay. Is there any minimum followers before start launch my business? Let's say any number or?
Sorry, say that again.
Is there any minimum number for followers before I start launch my business?
No, not at all. There's no minimum for followers, and that will honestly grow naturally over time. I would say just ask everyone you know to follow the page. You can send them, whether that's an email or even asking them in person or, sending them the link, but just get your initial, when I started my page, even as a social media marketer, right? When I started my own business page, when I became independent, my page only had 20 followers for a little while, and that's okay because it's going to grow over time because you're going to be creating good content.
Okay, clear. Thank you.
Yep. And one thing I want to just mention to everyone about the whole follower thing, I know we're all super obsessed with the idea of followers as like the most important metric, but the reality is if your page has 100,000 followers, but no one's buying your product, it's not useful, right? So there's kind of what I like to call a critical mass. So when you get past 100 or 200 followers, that's kind of your critical mass. Once you have about 200 followers, people believe you're a real business page. Not that they wouldn't before, but it starts to, kind of help build trust. But ultimately, it's more important that you have less followers, but people who are actually buying your product or service than having 100,000 followers. So don't worry too much about followers. That will come with time. And you can make it part of your business practice, right? So every time you have a customer, one of the things, if they're happy with your service, you ask them to follow you on social media and get very comfortable with that ask, because just tell them why. You can say, hey, it was great working with you. Here's my business page. Follow it. I'll be giving advice every Tuesday on XYZ. Stand behind your page and the content that you're creating, and people will follow you. Okay, that's at the end of me getting on my soapbox.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. We have one more question from Peshra. I think you had a question.
Yes, I got a question. First, thank you for the presentation. Which ones you prefer? Is for starting a business on social media, to creating a page starting from 0 followers, or just buying a page, for example, for 70K? I know it's when people see your page, you change the cover, avatar logo, bio, everything. Account is 70K is building trust. That's right. Yes. And with the paid advertising, you got a new audience, you got a new customer. It can be your loyal customer. It can they buying your products. Okay, then which one you prefer? Starting from 0 followers and or buying a page, Facebook page, for example. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that question. And I would say start with 0 followers. I know that may seem like a strange answer, but you want to start from 0 followers because a lot of times also Facebook rules. So I actually went through this even with my own business. So I changed the name of my business and Facebook would not allow me to change my page name. And so when you're thinking about potentially buying a page, there is a chance, especially because Facebook has all these rules, that it can be misleading if you follow a page under a different name. So that's one issue with buying that page. But also, you can build, if you're willing to spend money on advertising, you can very quickly build your page. So what I would always choose is start with 0 followers and then pay for some Facebook ads to generate awareness and to get likes. And then, yeah, you would grow your page a lot faster, and it would be with people who honestly want to follow you and potentially buy your product. So if you have money to spend on paid ads, start with a page with 0, put up some great content, maybe a couple weeks worth of content, right? So you've got 20 or 30 posts on there, and then spend some money on Facebook ads to get likes.
That sounds great.
Awesome. You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Are there any other questions for Melissa? Those were all of the questions that were written down. If you have any other questions, either feel free to just say them out loud, or if you look at managed participants, there should be a little button that says raise hand, and I'll be able to see if you are kind of raising your hand and you want to talk. So I do not, ooh, Ahmed, do you have another question?
I don't have a question. I just want to add something to all the listeners. I want to say that how much time are you willing to spend on your social media? Because I started and I've been sharing daily. Each day I share one picture of a tiny planet of a 360 photo that I take. And it kept growing from 0 followers to right now I have 1,000 followers. So how much time are they willing to spend? Yeah, thank you. How much time are they willing to spend on their social media brand? Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. I just want to jump in real quick here and say, what I would recommend for starting out is that you are willing to spend at least 2 hours a week. And 2 hours a week, what you can do is you can kind of figure out what you're going to post for an entire week, for the most case, right? Depending on how complicated your content is. But it should not take more than roughly 2 to 3 hours a week if you're planning your content for the week. If you're doing it daily, it might be, 20 minutes a day. I don't know exactly how much, but definitely do think about your time investment. I think that's a great point that you make here.
Nora,
is there a question? Yeah. Oh, how many posts per week is recommended? Is that the question? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. I think that's a really good question. It depends on your brand. I know that's kind of like the lawyer answer, right? It depends. But definitely it does depend on how many platforms you're on. So what I recommend is don't spread yourself too thin. Pick 1 or 2 platforms when you're first starting your business. You can get the handles secured on like a couple platforms, but do not try and run a Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and an Instagram account if you're a new business owner. You will get overwhelmed very quickly. You will not be able to follow any best practices, and you will share the same content on every platform. So that said, if you're on, let's say, Facebook and Instagram, Instagram, I recommend 1 photo a day, generally Monday through Friday. It's going to depend ultimately on your target audience, but once a day. And same thing with Facebook. So 1 is kind of your minimum. So when you're thinking about that, if you're on 2 platforms, that's about 10 posts a week, right? And that is going to vary a little bit, but again, I recommend really focusing in on 1, maybe 2 platforms when you're first getting started.
Great. I actually have one question for you, Melissa. A couple of the entrepreneurs that we work with, and some of them are on this platform, they're actually running their business fully over Instagram or Facebook. So they're, you know, selling things online over either Instagram or Facebook. Do you have any specific kind of advice for someone who's selling something over Facebook?
Yes. So I'm going to start with Instagram, if that's all right. But yes, so for Instagram, so something I want to just tell all of you about Instagram's algorithm. So for those of you who don't know, the algorithm is basically what determines which posts show up in someone's feed and in what order. And the algorithm is tricky and it's hard to manage, but Instagram has not figured out how to apply their feed algorithm to Instagram stories. So this is an incredibly powerful engine. If you are on Instagram, please use stories, because basically your followers are going to see them in random order. It's not based on how much engagement you have, how many followers you have. So every time you make a Instagram image post, make a post in your story that says, hey, go check out my latest Instagram posts, right? So direct people there, because that's huge. Also for sales, Instagram stories are excellent. So you can post multiple stories. If you want to even have like basically an explanation, and each story is a little bit of different text, people follow along with those. I don't know what the psychology behind that is, but people are willing to read every story because it kind of auto plays, right? It's that same notion as videos. So if you are in sales on Instagram and Facebook, Instagram stories are incredibly powerful. And where you want to direct people to is say things like, click on the link in our bio. And because you can't post links on Instagram, you can put rotating links in your main page. So whatever you're selling at the time, you can have a link in your actual profile bio, and then people can go click there and go directly to what you're selling. Now on Facebook, if you're using it for exclusively for sales, make sure that you're going in and joining groups. Groups are incredibly powerful for sales, right? Because people still want to buy from people. Join as many groups that are related to your target market. But caveat to that, if you are a guy, don't join a group for moms, right? So like have some awareness of like, even if you're selling to moms, if you're a guy, please don't join a group for moms. You're going to get kicked out real quick by the moderator. But if you are able to join particular groups for entrepreneurs, whatever that is an excellent way to be able to do sales, is to share your products there and share very authentically.
That's awesome advice. Thank you so much. That's really interesting stuff. Does anybody else have any other questions for Melissa that you feel like she hasn't gotten to yet?
There's a lot about social media, so I'm sure you still have more questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking through the list of people on this call, and I know that a lot of you really kind of focus on social media. So if there's any burning question that you have, ask it now.
And even ones that aren't related to what I presented on. Like I'm happy, we can go off topic here for a minute.
I mean, I wonder just kind of while we're seeing if anyone else has any questions. Melissa, oh, there's a question. You're on.
Yes. So what should be done about a bad comment on your post? This is an excellent question. So this is kind of comes to the whole like PR, public relations, handling that on social media. So it depends. Again, so if it is a customer that is complaining about something, you do not want to remove their comment. What I recommend you do is you take it offline. So you respond to them and say, I'm so sorry this happened to you. You know, I have sent you a direct message, and can we please talk about this offline? Now, if it's a random person that's a spammer, go ahead and delete it. and probably block them, right? Like if this is a random person, there are trolls online, unfortunately, and there will be people who comment that know nothing about your business that just because your post showed up. So feel free to delete ones that are people that are random, but if it is someone who is a prospective customer or a customer and they're frustrated by your customer service or whatever it is, then definitely respond to them publicly and ask that you speak, that you can take it to direct message, because you never want to publicly try and resolve a customer complaint.
Awesome. And Zaid, you have a question?
So it looks like,
yes. Yes, please. If I am using different platform like LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, shall I post use the same post or use different one?
Great question. So I think, again, it depends. Like if it is a big company announcement, so for example, like a company launch, feel free to use the same post on every platform. But if it's, kind of your day-to-day content and it isn't something that's applicable to all of your followers, I would say that's when you want to try and diversify your content based on how you categorize your followers, right? Are they potentially people that know you, current customers, prospective customers? But for big company-wide announcements, definitely post it across all the platforms.
Sounds good. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Are there any other questions? Shema, do you want to unmute yourself and ask? Shema?
Hi.
Okay, Shema, I just unmuted you. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thanks, Alice, and thanks, Melissa, for this chance.
Yeah.
Shema, do you want to ask the question that you just wrote?
Yeah, as you know, I will introduce myself to others. I'm fashion designer. I have an online store in Instagram and Facebook. Last week, I posted all my new collection. It's for summer. And from last week until today, no one ordered anything. This is first time it's happened with me.
And
I don't
Shema,
know why.
I just want to add, I remember you saying, Shema, that you felt like maybe you were having problems because you hadn't posted in a while, right? And you thought that maybe that messed up kind of the algorithm.
Yeah. So what can I do for refresh my lines?
Yeah. So question, so when was the last time you had posted prior to posting the collection? Had it been like a week, a few weeks, a month?
A month.
A month. Okay, that's totally why. Yeah, so the algorithm kind of like, it's every 30, not every 30 days, it's even more frequent than that, but if it's every 30 days, it's not going to appear to almost anyone. So what I would actually recommend that you do is, if you know there are certain people that kind of consistently buy from you, I would go and comment on your own post and @mention a bunch of your followers. Like go and @mention and be like, hey, I want to make sure you didn't miss this. So you can go comment on your existing posts. Also try using, are you on Facebook and Instagram?
Yeah.
So I would use the stories feature on Instagram. So when you go to your profile, you can click on your profile picture and be able to basically share some stories and be like, hey, did you miss the collection last week? Just kind of be playful about it, right? So you can say, hey, I want to make sure you're not missing out on this awesome new line, right? So show some excitement about it. You could even take a little video of yourself talking about it and say, this is why I'm so excited about this collection. And, and show maybe some images or some people wearing it, right? So there's I think a lot that can be done there, and I wouldn't worry too much about it. But you will need to continue to post, even if you're reposting that same collection over the next month, just to keep your content up.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, most welcome.
Okay.
Shema, I added a comment in the box that said, please share your Instagram in the chat so that we can all follow you also.
Yes.
Thanks, of course.
Definitely.
I will send it now.
Great, great.
Okay.
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 Any last questions? We have just a few minutes left with Melissa.
Sorry, I have another one. Regarding hashtag, what's another tool like hashtag on Facebook we can use on LinkedIn and on Instagram?
So are you looking for a tool or recommended hashtags?
Yeah, recommended hashtag and tools on another platform.
Yeah, so so in terms of tools, I typically actually don't use a lot of tools. I'll do kind of a lot of original research, but I'll give you some tips about how you can think about what hashtags to use. So when you're coming up with your hashtags for LinkedIn, for Facebook, for Twitter, for Instagram, I mean, you can use hashtags on all of them. For Instagram, you can use up to 30 hashtags in a single post, and I recommend you use at least 20. When you're thinking about creating your hashtags, the categories I always go through in my mind are, first is your location. What is the location that you're trying to sell to? So think of city, province, state. You want to use variations on all of those words, right? So like 3 to 4 of those at least. So your location, what is your topic? What are you posting about? Like, what is your brand? If you're a graphic designer, you know, design, like think of those different words, because your best case scenario is not actually to use one of those tools, but to think, what would people search for, right? Because ultimately you're going to know your customer better than a random tool. So you've got your location, your topic, and then what is generally, like, what is the action happening in the image, video, or piece of content? You know, is it an event? Is it whatever that is? So those are the kind of the 3 categories that you can think about when coming up with hashtags. But you can, if you already have a tool that you're using, that's going to work across all the different platforms, right? Because people are still searching for the same things. When it comes to Facebook posts, I don't recommend using more than 5. It starts to look a little bit, I don't want to say spam-like, but a little. So make sure you use it at the end of your post or words within the text. And then LinkedIn, I would say no more than 5 as well. So that's kind of how I think about hashtags. I'm like, what is the location of my potential customer? What is the action that's happening? What's the subject matter? You know, and what action do I want them to take?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, most welcome.
Awesome. I think I'm not seeing any more questions. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. This was extremely informative. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody else did too, and I think this will be really helpful for everyone in terms of their businesses and their personal brands. Do you have any kind of final words of advice or thoughts for us before we log out?
Yeah, I guess yeah, one kind of last piece is, I know I said this in kind of like the numbers section, but truly, I know it's very easy to get discouraged when you're first using social media for your business, when your followers are kind of small, when your engagement's kind of low. But just keep in mind, there really is no failures with social media. If something doesn't work, you try again, right? I mean, all of you have the entrepreneurial spirit. You are here because you persist through whatever comes ahead of you, right? So missing a few likes is very small in the grand scheme. So I don't want you to get discouraged if there are times when you try things and they don't work. Think of it like a game, like a puzzle, right? You're constantly kind of playing with things, trying to figure out what works, what fits, because our target audiences are moving targets. Really, what works this year will probably shift a little bit next year because people change what they like. So don't be afraid to try new things, and just know that, like, if a post gets 0 likes, it is in no way a failure. Even to this day, I've been doing this for 9 years, and I will put out posts and be like, oh my God, I got 0 likes, and be a little horrified. But just pick up and keep moving forward, because as long as you keep sharing content, as long as you're trying to be your authentic self, you're going to do great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We really appreciated having you here. Everybody who joined, thank you so much for joining. Like I said, we are recording this, so we'll also share this on our Facebook pretty soon so that you guys can all go back through and listen to the recording. Melissa, this was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, and real quick too, I will be, the question about the GIF creator, I'll be sending out a link with that. We'll include that kind of in the follow-up email, as well as I have a whole 3-4 video series on YouTube that dives more into a lot of these topics that you are all welcome to go into, especially the part about the giveaways. So I'll be getting all those links, and we'll send out one kind of big follow-up email. But thank you so much for joining today.
Okay, awesome. Goodbye, everybody. Have an amazing night, and thank you to everyone. Talk to you all soon. Bye.
Bye.